Malaysia calls for Israeli accountability. Senior British lawmaker calls for Rishi Sunak to step down. Good afternoon and salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Brendan Lepal and you're watching World Today. Malaysia demands accountability for Israel's clear violations of international law in Gaza. Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Mohammed Hassan said the lack of accountability for Israel's war crimes in Gaza undermines the legitimacy of international law and efforts towards ending the illegal occupation of Palestine.
Malaysia demands accountability for Israel's clear violation of international law. We welcome and support the decision by South Africa to institute proceedings against Israel before the International Court of Justice. The lack of accountability for Israel's war crimes undermines the legitimacy of international law and efforts towards ending the illegal occupation of Palestine.
Datuk Seri Mohammed said this at the United Nations Security Council open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including Palestinian question this morning. He also highlighted Malaysia's clear stance that there should be no reduction in Palestinian territory. He also pointed to the Security Council's inability to call for a ceasefire, which is partly responsible for what is now over 100 days of carnage in Gaza. Mohammed said Malaysia is appalled that Israel has been allowed to carry out what can only be described as indiscriminate bombing, targeting homes, shelters, evacuation routes and even medical centers. He said Malaysia demands an immediate ceasefire and condemns the forced displacements of Palestinians, and it will continue to do all within its means and within its rights to bring an end to this injustice and illegality. Israel's rejection of the idea of a two-state solution with the Palestinians is unacceptable and could prolong the war in Gaza. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said this at the Security Council.
This refusal and the denial of the right to statehood to the Palestinian people would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security. It would exacerbate polarization and embolden extremists everywhere. The right of the Palestinian people to build their own fully independent state must be recognized by all. And any refusal to accept a two-state solution by any party must be firmly rejected.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has drawn global condemnation in recent days and defied the United States, which provides Israel with billions of dollars in military aid, by rejecting calls for all Palestinian states. The rejection has come as Israel pounds Hamas in Gaza, where the death toll reached nearly 25,500 as of Tuesday, with around 70% of the dead women and children. Meanwhile, 6 displaced Palestinians were killed when one of the UN-run shelters was hit in Khan Yunis, the focus of Israel's ground offensive in the southern Gaza Strip. UNRWA's General Commissioner Philippe Lazzarini said in a post on X that terrified staff, patients and displaced people are now trapped inside the few remaining hospitals in Khan Yunis as heavy fighting continues. Lazzarini said at least 6 of the displaced were killed and more others were wounded in the incident. He also called on all parties to take every precaution to minimize harm and protect civilians, medical facilities and personnel at the UN premises in accordance with international law. The Israeli army did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The Israeli offensive in the Gaza Strip has displaced most of the enclave's 2.3 million people and caused a humanitarian crisis. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said North Korea fired multiple cruise missiles towards the sea of its west coast on Wednesday. The JCS said in a statement that the missiles were fired at around 7 a.m. and were being analyzed by South Korean and United States intelligence. The JCS added further activities by the North were being monitored. tensions have spiked on the Korean peninsula following intensified military maneuvers by the South Korean and US militaries in response to weapons testing by the North. The latest firing of missiles come after Pyongyang said it tested a solid-fuel hypersonic missile with intermediate range earlier this month in a move that was condemned by the United States, South Korea and Japan. North Korean media KCNA reported that Pyongyang had tested an underwater nuclear weapon system in a protest response to continued joint naval exercises by the US, South Korea and Japan. Early last year, Pyongyang carried out multiple tests of a purported underwater nuclear attack drone, claiming that it could unleash a radioactive tsunami. Turkey's parliament yesterday ratified Sweden's NATO membership after more than a year of delays that upset Western efforts to show resolve in the face of Russia's war on Ukraine. Lawmakers voted 287 to 55 in favor of the Nordic nations' bid to become the 32nd member of the alliance after it won the public backing of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Turkish leader is expected to sign Sweden's ratification document and conclude Ankara's role in the protracted saga in the coming days. After the vote, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said on social media that they are one step closer to becoming a full state member of NATO. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg also welcomed the move and urged Hungary to do the same as soon as possible. Turkey's green light leaves Budapest as the last holdout in an accession process that Sweden and Finland began in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 2 years ago. Ankara forced the northern neighbors to split up their applications after finding fault with Sweden and approving Finland after a few rounds of talks. Finland's membership last April doubled the length of NATO's border with Russia and boosted the defenses of 3 tiny Baltic nations that joined the bloc following the collapse of the former Soviet Union. Former United States President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump arrived at a polling station in Londonderry during the New Hampshire primary election on Tuesday. Voters in New Hampshire were choosing whether to give Donald Trump a smooth glide to the Republican presidential nomination or bolster rival Nikki Haley's long-shot bid to topple him on Tuesday in a pivotal primary election. The former US president and the former South Carolina governor made their final pitches to voters in what became a two-person race after Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, once seen as the party's best bet to take on Trump, dropped out and endorsed Trump. Trump was projected to have won the state's Republican presidential primary election by Edison Research. With 25% of the expected vote tallied, according to Edison, Trump had 55%, compared with 43.5% for Haley, who had hoped the northeastern state's sizable cadre of independent voters would carry her to an upset win. Trump had a record-setting victory in Iowa's first in-the-nation contest last week. Victories in the 2 crucial early voting states would give Trump a huge boost in momentum in his race to secure the Republican nomination for the White House, setting up a rematch in the 2024 presidential race with Democratic incumbent President Joe Biden. Senior British Conservative lawmaker Simon Clarke on Tuesday called for a change of Prime Minister, saying Rishi Sunak was leading the governing party into an election later this year. He claimed that where they will be massacred. Since Sunak pushed through his Rwanda immigration plan last week, ignoring the demands of several in his party's right wing to toughen it, some have been increasingly vocal in their criticism of the British leader, fearing he has little chance of reducing the opposition Labour Party's lead before the election. While Clarke is favoured by some of the right wing of the Conservative Party, his calls for a replacement likely not go down well with other more centrist lawmakers, who still hope Sunak can lead them to victory. In a column for the Daily Telegraph newspaper, Clarke said that, quote, "Now is not the time to despair. It is the time to act." He acknowledged that his idea might not be welcomed by all sides of the Conservative Party. Clarke's idea set off a fresh round of internal party warfare as Tory grandees from all wings of the party hit back at Clarke on social media. A new Tory leader would be the fourth Conservative Prime Minister in 18 months. Boris Johnson departed in September 2022 and was briefly succeeded by Liz Truss before Sunak took charge. Coming up next, Germany eyes Vietnam as investment destination, reducing reliance on China. Stay with us. Japanese nuclear power plant operator Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, wrapped up testing on Tuesday of the first drones to be deployed to the wrecked Fukushima Daiichi plant in its decades-long decommissioning process. A snake-shaped robot and 4 drones are set to be dispatched in February to survey the damage in Fukushima Daiichi's Unit 1 reactor, almost 13 years after its core melted down and triggered a hydrogen blast in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. All the robots have surveyed the submerged interior of the Unit 1 reactor's containment vessel. This would be the first time a drone would enter the vessel to provide a fuller picture of the damage above water. TEPCO hopes the images from the drone will help assess how the melted fuel debris could be removed. The nuclear reactor in Unit 1 was the first to start melting down after a massive tsunami struck in the east coast of Japan in March 2011. It is believed to be the most severely damaged out of the 4 reactors that were operating that day. TEPCO is still in the process of trying to understand the extent of the damage and how to remove the molten fuel, a process that experts say will take decades. German Federal President Frank-Walter Steinmeier received a welcoming ceremony in Hanoi on Tuesday, hosted by his Vietnamese counterpart Vo Van Truong. A German business delegation, including top firms for tunnel machines, wind farms and industrial supplies, joined President Steinmeier in the visit as Berlin strives to reduce its reliance on China. During the visit, Steinmeier and the German Labour Minister Hubertus Heil signed a memorandum of understanding with their Vietnamese counterparts on skilled labour mobility to facilitate transfers of Vietnamese workers to Germany. After the meeting with President Thuong, Steinmeier said some of the companies with him sought to establish a presence in the country. Companies in the business mission include Herentnecht, which dominates the global market for tunnel boring machines. It is already selling tools to build the metro in Ho Chi Minh City amid Vietnam's plans to expand its railway and metro systems. According to the German Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, German companies have invested over $3 billion in the Southeast Asian manufacturing hub, led by automotive giant Bosch. Heavy snow blanketed multiple regions in southern China, causing transportation disruptions and damaging greenhouse farms. Traffic on multiple expressways in Zhejiang, Guizhou and Guangxi provinces were grinded to a standstill, with several toll gates closed due to the snow. Cities in southern China experienced some of the coldest days so far in 2024, as the sweeping cold air hovering in the central and eastern areas of the country has led to steep temperature drops. CCTV reported that mushroom greenhouse farms in Jiangxi Province's Li'an County were damaged due to heavy snowfall. The State Meteorological Bureau said the cold wave is expected to ease after Tuesday, with temperature rising in the next 3 days. The National Meteorological Center issued a yellow alert for snow and blue alerts for the cold wave and wind on Monday morning, raising the alert for snow and lowering that for the cold wave. In China's 4-tier weather warning system, red is the most severe, followed by orange, yellow and blue. Pakistan and Afghanistan reopened a key trade crossing on Tuesday after a row over travel papers as Islamabad cracks down on cross-border movements. The Torkham border closure since 12 January came after Islamabad imposed tighter controls, requiring drivers from both sides to have visas and passports documents many Afghans do not have. A Pakistan border official confirmed the reopening after negotiations between Islamabad and Kabul, allowing hundreds of waiting trucks to cross. Lorries were allowed to cross again on Tuesday without the need for passports and visas. Pakistan officials said tighter restrictions on trade and on-off border closures are a pressure tactic to get the Taliban government to work with Pakistan on security. Islamabad has also recently forced out hundreds of thousands of undocumented Afghans living in Pakistan. More than 500,000 Afghans fled in the 4 months since Islamabad imposed a deadline ordering 1.7 million Afghans, it says, are living in the country illegally to leave or risk arrest or deportation. Millions of Afghans escaping conflict poured into Pakistan in past decades, including around 600,000 since the Taliban ousted the US-backed government. Polish President Andrzej Duda on Tuesday pardoned 2 members of the former government and called for their immediate release from prison, in line with demands from the main opposition Law and Justice (PIS) party that lost power last month. Former Interior Minister Mariusz Kamiński and his deputy Maciej Wasek were jailed this month after being sentenced for abuse of power in previous roles. Both men went on a hunger strike, claiming to be political prisoners, and their jailing triggered large protests by tens of thousands of PIS supporters. Duda, a PIS ally, had pardoned both politicians after they were first sentenced in 2015, but Poland's Supreme Court deemed his move invalid, saying a presidential pardon could not be granted before a final ruling in the case was issued. The 2 men then served in the nationalist PIS government, but the Supreme Court said last year that the case should be reopened. They were sentenced to 2 years in prison in December when a new centrist coalition took power in Poland. Within days of their imprisonment, Duda announced that he had started the process of pardoning them for a second time. Costa Rica is now wrestling with a surge in violence so striking that its government is borrowing a page from nearby El Salvador, which adopted draconian tactics to tackle its own crime problems. In an effort to cut a homicide rate that has soared 40% in the last year alone, Costa Rican President Rodrigo Chavez has begun touting firm-hand policies. These include upping jail sentences for adolescents from 15 years to the adult maximum of 50 years, allowing nationals to be extradited abroad, and extending use of preventative detention, easing the arrests of suspects with limited evidence. Chavez presented his national security plan in November, blaming drug trafficking for the rise in violence. Costa Rica's newfound openness to such measures underlines the regional popularity of Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele's sweeping crackdown, which has allowed people to indefinitely detain suspected gang members without the right to a lawyer. Costa Rica, which has no standing army, saw its murder rate reach 17.2 per 100,000 people in 2023, up from 11.7 in 2018. By contrast, in El Salvador, the rate plunged to 2.4 after being the highest in the world less than a decade earlier. Inflation-weary Cubans are preparing for a new wave of inflation after the government last week rolled out details of an austerity plan that economists say will touch nearly every facet of the island's already flailing economy. According to Prime Minister Manuel Marrero, the measures, which include price and tax increases and cuts in subsidies, will slow a soaring budget deficit forecast to exceed 18% of gross domestic product and set the stage for growth. Authorities have already announced gas at the pump will jump nearly 5-fold on 1st February. However, some economists say less visible government price increases, such as on wholesale fuel and moving freight, as well as sales and import taxes, are sure to ignite substantial hikes on most products and services at the retail level. Inflation was 30% last year, cooling slightly from 38% in 2022, according to the government. Many economists say those rates fall short of reality as the government does not adequately monitor a booming informal market pegged to an informal exchange rate much higher than the official one. Uzbekistan and Australia through to Asian Cup last 16. That and more next in sports.
Uzbekistan joined Australia in the last 16 of the Asian Cup on Tuesday after the two teams played out a 1-all draw in the final group game, while Syria beat India in the other encounter in Group B.
Australia had already qualified for the knockout stage and guaranteed a top 2 finish, with the result moving the 2015 champions to 7 points, while Uzbekistan finished second with 5 points. Australia took the lead at the stroke of half-time when they were awarded a penalty, following a VAR check for a handball from Odiljon Hamrobekov, with Martin Boyle putting away the spot kick. But Uzbekistan equalized in the 78th minute when Azizbek Turgunboev climbed over the defense to hit home Jalolidin Masharipov's cross at the far post. In the other group game, Syria beat India 1-0 after Omar Kribin, the 2017 Asian Footballer of the Year, netted in the 76th minute to give the Middle Eastern side their first goal of the tournament. With 4 points, Syria have qualified for the last 16 as one of the best third-place teams, while India exit the competition without scoring a goal in 3 losses.
Meanwhile, Palestine wrapped up their Group C campaign in style with a 3-0 win over Hong Kong after Odey Dabak grabbed a double, securing the spot in the last 16 as one of the 4 best third-place teams.
Palestine were on course to finish second when Iran led the United Arab Emirates 2-0 in the other match, but an injury-time goal from UAE's Yahya Al-Ghazani pushed Palestine back to third on goal difference after both teams finished with 4 points. Palestine opened the scoring when Dabak powered home a header under pressure in the 12th minute before Zaid Kunbar doubled the lead with a header cross goal. Dabak then got his second when he was in the right place at the right time to tap in a rebound when Tamer Seyam saw his curling strike come back off the crossbar. Hong Kong had the opportunity to score a consolation goal when they were awarded a penalty after a VAR check, but Everton Camargo's spot kick came off the bar. In the other Group C match, Iran saw off the United Arab Emirates 2-1 to end their Asian Cup campaign with a 100% record. Mehdi Taremi scored twice for Iran, with both goals assisted by Sadar Azmoun either side of halftime. Yahya Al-Ghazani has seen a penalty save earlier by Iran keeper Ali Reza Beiranvan, but the UAE forward found the bottom corner in the 93rd minute for the crucial goal that saw them qualify second despite the defeat.
And moving on to tennis, Italy's Jannik Sinner set up a mouth-watering Australian Open semi-final against Novak Djokovic as he fought off Andrei Rublev in a late-night duel at Melbourne Park yesterday.
The 4th seed showed patience and resilience to claim a 6-4, 7-6, 6-3 win against the Russian, who now owns the ugly record of 10 defeats out of 10 in Grand Slam quarterfinals. 5th seed Rublev, as he always does, threw the kitchen sink at his opponent but was left with the same old sinking feeling as he consistently failed to take his chances, especially when leading the second set tiebreak 5-1. That proved pivotal as Sinner hit back in majestic fashion to take the second set, and from that moment on, the outcome never looked in doubt. Rublev wore a world-weary expression in the 3rd set and dropped serve to hand Sinner a 4-2 lead, and the clean-hitting Italian duly closed out a comfortable win at nearly 1:30 a.m. local time to reach his first Australian Open semi-final. The 22-year-old Sinner will take heart for his forthcoming battle with 10-time champion Djokovic on Friday, having beaten him in the ATP finals at the end of last year.
In the women's draw, Aryna Sabalenka overpowered Barbora Krejcikova 6-2, 6-3 in a brutally swift quarter-final to keep her Australian Open title defense firmly on course and set up a showdown with US Open champion Coco Gauff.
The second seed hammered her serves at ground strokes over the net, accompanied by her trademark yelps, breaking the 9th-seeded Czech 3 times to only the one hiccup herself and clinching the first set after little more than 30 minutes. Krejcikova had lost the opening set in 3 of her 4 matches on the way to the last 8, but there was to be no comeback against the Belarusian. Sabalenka held with a couple of huge serves, then broke the Czech to love to set up the semi-final date with American Gauff, who denied Sabalenka her second Grand Slam crown in the final at Flushing Meadows last September. With all but one of the seeds in the top half of draw, including world number 1 Iga Swiatek, having already departed, the meeting between Sabalenka and Gauff could go a long way to deciding who takes home the Daphne Arcus Memorial Trophy.
And now in motorsports, Madrid will host the Spanish Grand Prix from 2026 to 2035 on a new city circuit around the capital's IFEMA exhibition centre. The Formula One governing body said this yesterday in an announcement that left Barcelona facing an uncertain future.
The Circuit de Catalonia's current contract expires after the 2026 race, but Formula One chief executive Stefano Domenicali suggested the Barcelona track could remain on the calendar beyond then. Sources indicated there was a possibility of Spain having 2 races in 2026. The country currently has 2 Formula One drivers, Carlos Sainz at Ferrari and double world champion Fernando Alonso, now 42 but still a frequent podium finisher last season, at Aston Martin. With Sainz in the audience, Domenicali declared the Madrid contract marked the start of an exciting new chapter for F1 in Spain. Madrid last hosted a Grand Prix at Jarama, to the north of the city, in 1981, with Barcelona becoming the home of the Spanish race in 1991.
Isu-isu sukan tempatan di pelbagai arena, pelbagai gelanggang. Pencapaian dan kontroversi akan dikupas dan dibincangkan dalam Planet Sukan setiap Ahad 10 malam di TV1 dan saluran sukan RTM. Saksikan juga secara penstreaman langsung di RTM Klik.
Kita perkenalkan sistem padu pangkalan data utama. Pertama, ia selaras dengan pendekatan dan dasar transformasi digital. Kedua, menjamin supaya manfaat dan kemudahan itu dinikmati oleh orang yang berhak menerimanya. Dan tentunya dengan cara yang sedemikian, mengurangkan kos, mengurangkan ketirisan. Dan kaedah diperkenalkan melalui padu ini ialah secara tidak langsung memaksa setiap warga negara faham tentang transformasi digital dan menggunakan sistem padu. Dengan sendirinya kita ada pencerahan kecelekan budaya dan kecelekan digital.
And you're informed on the third edition of World Today. In our top story, Malaysia calls for Israeli accountability following violations of international law in Gaza. I'm Brendan Lepol. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.